Tales. Hello, I'm Merlin Mililli. Welcome to my fireside. Where we discuss all things weird. I'm a deadhead, and each of these shows so far, we've told the story of the Grateful Dead from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and we've discussed reincarnation pretty thoroughly. The story of the Grateful Dead is about reincarnation, and we've discussed reincarnation here every episode so far, which I plan to do, I think, for this whole season at least. I'd like to show how there's a little thread that seems to connect each life I've lived according to my book in the Akashic Records. Now, the Akashic Records are a meditative place that I've had access to pretty much my whole life. Well, most of my life. And this life. And it's a meditative library where each soul has a book. And reincarnation is all about the soul living on beyond the body, and the body being sort of a vehicle, like my 77 Le Mans. You know, after a while, it's time to upgrade. So, I'd like to start with the story of the Grateful Dead, as it was told to me by a fire, told by a deadhead. I'm a deadhead. Jerry Garcia said he discovered from a young age that there were weird things in this world, and there were people that were concerned with them, and he wanted to be concerned with them. And he was concerned with all things weird. And here at Fireside Tales, that is what we discuss. Things that are weird. Reincarnation is pretty weird. A lot of people really don't seem to get it. So, here's the story of the Grateful Dead. There was a traveler, and he happened upon some people squabbling over a dead man's body. And he thought it was atrocious. So he paid the dead man's debts, and he paid for a proper burial, and he said a prayer over the grave, and he traveled on. The people had been squabbling over his debts and who was going to bury him, and And that is not what you do when someone has died. That's not proper respect for the dead, is it? The traveler paid proper respect for the dead. Then one day later in the traveler's life, still the same traveler from the beginning of the story, happens upon a life or death situation, and someone comes out of nowhere and just scoops him up and saves his life. He's flabbergasted. The traveler is like, oh my God, where did you come from? Who are you? Why did you save my life? And the stranger says, I am the Grateful Dead. So, in some circles, people think that at the end, it's a corpse that saves him. They talk about it in Long Strange Trip. Scorsese film about the Grateful Dead. It's a 4-hour flick. Excuse me. The shows were 4 hours, so I see why the film is 4 hours long. But throughout the whole thing, they seem to try to be appeasing or appealing to people who aren't deadheads, and I don't know anybody who really wants to sit through a 4-hour film, period. But when it's about the Grateful Dead, to somebody who doesn't like the Grateful Dead, that I don't know, it's probably almost cruel. 4 hours. My husband couldn't do it. He doesn't really like the Grateful Dead. Excuse me. So, last week we discussed my very first life, and our first episode we discussed my very last life, and today I'm going to discuss my first few thousand years. We're going to cover a lot of ground today because I only have one season I really want to spend on all this right now, so I don't want to get too involved in each life, but there are a few that stick out, and like I said, they thread this little thread that connects each life, which is really, I've found quite interesting, and I thought other people might also find quite interesting. I host another show called The Love Show, where we're always looking for what love is every week. Check it out. It's also on Mililli Studios channel, where Fireside Tales also is. So, last week we discussed my life as a shaman named Little Flower in Peru. And Little Flower, I discussed how she had moved her tribe interdimensionally. I know reincarnation is a big thing, and what is this interdimensionally stuff? And most people don't even believe in multi-dimensions and reincarnation. And what are you talking about, lady? I told you we were going to get weird. So the interdimensional stuff, though, apparently doesn't go down in the multiverse without cost. And the reason why I'm sure that I moved my tribe interdimensionally was because I had to pay for it. So I moved them, and then for 300 years, I had a penalty. So you don't get to just straddle dimensions without cost. And not everybody can straddle dimensions or move between them. You have to be from a certain dimension or have some kind of connection, have a parent from there, or you have to have a connection with another dimension to be able to move into it. You can't just travel interdimensionally without cost. There's high costs. And I'm not saying dollars. I had to spend 300 years, apparently, in what is called High Earth, where I didn't quite exist. I was a cloud bird. A bird made of cloud. I was sort of there, sort of not there, for 300 years. And then I was able to be human again. And I landed in Tibet, in and around Tibet. I was in Tibet, Nepal, for thousands of years. I apparently started out as a Buddhist monk, and I kept getting murdered. And I kept coming back as a Buddhist monk. And it kept happening. Thousands of years. Then I started running through the Buddhist monk's cycle. Through reincarnating as his mother, father, sister, brother. The whole cycle. And then once that was run out, I was still getting murdered. It was thousands of years of not making it a lot of years and just getting murdered. I guess, well, I mean, people have had it out for the Buddhist monks for a really long time. The Dalai Lama, they've been trying to kill him forever. I don't know why. I don't understand that. Let's find the most peaceful, compassionate person in the world and kill them. Why? What is the... I don't understand that. It can't be good for you karmically to do that. It just doesn't seem to make much sense. At least from the Buddhist frame of mind. Which is the other thing that's weird, is there's these things about the Buddhist faith that no one is supposed to know. And I know these things that are supposed to be big secrets. You have to be a monk to learn them. And thousands of years, I guess you learn some things. Anyway, so I lived out that life to its full extent. And then I was literally plucked. No, you wouldn't say plucked. I was plopped on a lightning bolt. Right to the base of the pyramids. I was born at the base of the pyramids in about 1500 BC. The daughter of the pharaoh. So I lived in the palace with all the people and the goings on. And there were lions when I was a child. Everywhere. All around. The pyramids, the Sphinx. And the Sphinx had a different face. When I was a child in this life, around 1500 BC, the Sphinx had the face of a lion. It matched her body. And the lion was looking up at the stars. People always said that it couldn't have had a different face because another face wouldn't, like a snout of a lion, wouldn't fit on their right, and it wouldn't, the weight distribution would be wrong and it would fall off anyway. But if the lion were looking up at the stars, that's a whole nother lion. It's a lion of a different color. Lion of a different posture. It's totally different weight distribution. And it's much more like the pyramids, where she'd end up being like a triangle, snout up. So then, while my father was still alive and still pharaoh, we had been terribly looted, robbed of a lot. They killed the lions and came in the night and just took everything they could. I don't even know who it was. We didn't know then, and I still don't know now. But my father had decided, the pharaoh, to move everything that was left, the tombs anyway, to the Valley of the Kings. And we did so in the night, just like the thieves. And, you know, we didn't want them to know where we were taking it. And we relocated all the tombs. And that's what started Hatshepsut's obsession with the Valley of the Kings. What became the Valley of the Kings? It wasn't the Valley of the Kings yet. But yes, I said Hatshepsut. She was the Pharaoh's daughter, and then the Pharaoh died. Her father was Tutmosis the first, and he died, when she was 12. And she married Tutmosis the second, who was her half-brother, and she became queen at that point. But shortly after that, Tutmosis II died. While she was married to him, she did have a daughter. And yes, he was her half-brother. But I don't feel like Tutmosis II was Neferyuri's father. Neferyuri was her daughter, and Senemu was her daughter's tutor from, like, infancy. And that was unusual, especially since he was like a royal engineer. He worked for the pharaoh. He was an engineer. It seems weird that he would be placed to be a tutor for a baby if he wasn't her father. I think he was her father. And I think that Hatshepsut she would be okay with people knowing. Senemu was a commoner. So in Egyptian society, it was frowned upon for them to be together. But in Hatshepsut's mind, I don't think she thought having her brother for her lover was appropriate. I don't think she thought that if people thought her and Senemu were together, it would be a problem. I don't think she was embarrassed by it. I don't think she tried to hide it, really. It just was not in the cards for them to marry. But Senemu was buried in her queen's sarcophagus, because being queen didn't last long for Hatshepsut. So she got a letter from the priests upon the death of her husband, Tutmosis II, her half-brother. And the priests in ancient Egypt don't get talked about enough, and don't get enough credit for what they did. They pretty much ran the show. They taught the pharaohs what the pharaohs knew, and learned. So the priests were running the show. And when Tutmosis II died, they sent Hatshepsut a note saying that she needed to collect the ceremonial headdress, the ceremonial beard, and the pharaoh's kilt from them. And that she had to come get it in this weird place. She had to go down this tunnel and into the earth, and it got hot, and there were all these murals along the way, and she had seen the murals before. Her father had shown them to her. She had several other sisters and brothers, but they all died by this point. And her father never wanted her to be pharaoh, just because her father was pharaoh and knew that it was a heavy responsibility. Her father was pharaoh of Upper and Lower Egypt, and her husband was also. And it was a lot of responsibility. When her husband died, she had another step-brother who was just an infant at the time of her husband's death. And so she gets this letter from the priests, and she goes in search of the headdress and the beard and the kilt, thinking she's just retrieving her husband's things, the things that had been her father's, and, she's thinking she's going to hold it and cry, like, she wasn't thinking she was going to assume the position of pharaoh. She was already queen. And she's in mourning. And she gets this letter. She has to go down this shaft and see these murals and hear her father's voice talking about the murals and hear all the lessons she was taught, and it all comes rushing back to her as she goes down this shaft, and it's getting hot and sweaty, and she's nervous. What are they going to do to her? She's next in line for the throne, and then she starts to think, oh, they might want to kill me. But then she starts to think, I'm next in line for the throne. And then she starts to think how if she wasn't a girl, the throne would have been hers when her father died. 12 was old enough to assume a throne, Pharaoh's throne. I think King Tut was 8. But she goes and she retrieves these ceremonial things from the priests and realizes as she's going to get the ceremonial things is her responsibility to be Pharaoh, and that no one else can. No one else has been trained. No one else has the knowledge. No one else has the ceremonial things. No one else has access to them. So she assumes the position of Pharaoh. And they king her down there. History says she just did it herself. She didn't. The priests did it. Because they knew she was the only one who could take that position. She reigned for 22 years. But I swear that trip down that shaft to go get those ceremonial things felt longer to her than her 22-year reign as Pharaoh. As far as I know, I think she was the only woman to reign as Pharaoh. But after 22 years went by and the infant boy, Tutmosis III, excuse me, he was her stepson, not stepbrother. He grew up and was campaigning and in the military and doing stuff, but Hatshepsut was still Pharaoh. Now he could have probably come, 12, 15 years in to her reign and said, hey, I think I'm ready to be king. But he waited 22, and he didn't do it that way. He didn't say, hey, I think I'm ready to be king. Instead, he tortured her and fatally wounded her and threw her out into the desert. There's a documentary out. Excuse me, called Secrets of the Lost Queen. And in the Secrets of the Lost Queen, they're looking for Hatshepsut. And they have a choice at the end between two mummies, and, well, one of them isn't quite mummified. Well, one of them is screaming in agony, and that one's her. My necklace just fell off. This is a guitar string necklace. I make these, I wear them all the time. Guitar strings hold glass beads really well, and I really like the way glass beads look and shine, but they're heavy, so I string them on my old guitar strings, and they make great necklaces. So, Hatshepsut, because she was a successful pharaoh, it really made Tutmosis III look bad because she was a woman. So he tried to chisel away all the beautiful stuff that Senemu and Hatshepsut put up all over Egypt. Her pink obelisks are still, well, one of them is still standing, and it's the tallest obelisk still in Egypt. Though there were two, and the tops of the pink obelisks had electrum on them. And I really think its intention that those two obelisks with the electrum on top, I think the intention was to harness electricity. Think about if that got struck by lightning. Like a little, it should hold electricity between the two gold and silver electrum pieces. Shouldn't it hold a bolt? You'd think. If it got struck by lightning? I think the pyramids were energy generating center. I don't think they were tombs at all. But there are tombs up there by the Sphinx and by the pyramids, and they're pretty much empty now. They, like I said, moved all that when they were being looted. And after her father died, Hatshepsut and Senemu built the most beautiful place. It's in another language, it's called the most sacred of sacred places. And it's her funerary temple. It's so pretty. Still to this day, it's still beautiful. And I don't know, I've never actually been there. I've just seen it in video form and photos, but I don't know if Tutmosis III went through the funerary temple, but he went through a lot of different places where Hatshepsut had put her name, and he chiseled it out. He chiseled her likeness out, he chiseled her name out, he chiseled her out. He tried to chisel her out of history. And he killed her. I'm certain she was murdered. That's something else I discussed in a couple of our other episodes, was that there is a theory in the spirit realm that perhaps only people who are murdered reincarnate. And one of the reasons why I'm making this show is because people really don't, there's some people who really just don't seem to understand reincarnation. They just can't wrap their head around it. The body dies. The spirit goes on and is reborn in a little baby and gets to have a new life. A new vehicle, if you will. So the other tradition I like to keep here at Fireside Tales is playing David Crosby's deja vu in a different way every week. And so far I played it on the regular guitar with an amp and just an acoustic. Then I played it on the 12 string, and now today I'm going to do a little version of it on the harp for ancient Egypt. So I just got this thing, so bear with me because I don't really know how to play it, but I don't think anybody gave anybody in ancient Egypt any lessons on how to play the first harp. So we'll just go with that. If I had ever been here before, I would probably know just what to do. Don't you? If I had ever been here before and another time around the wheel, I would probably know just how to deal with all of you. And I feel like I've been here before. Feel like I've been here before. And you know, it makes me wonder what's going on under the ground. Do you know? Don't you wonder? What's going on down under you? La la la, la la la, la. We have all been here before. 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 So, that's this week's Fireside Tales. Thanks for watching. Join us next week. A Mililli Studios production.